الصلاة والسلام على خيرة خلق الله أجمعين وهو رحمة الله للعالمين هو أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد والصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المقتولين الميامين المهديين ولعنة الله دائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين من يوم عداوتهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقال الله تعالى في كتابه المجيد: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على. Continuing the subject from last night about the importance of having the ma'rifah of Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman, we introduced it last night. We spoke about how the ihsan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the beauty of God and God's beauty upon His creation and to His creation and for His creation and with His creation comes through the vehicle of wilayah. And we discussed the ayah of Quran and the relevant ahadith, and we spoke about the concept of thankfulness to Allah. And ultimately, what are we thankful for? And why are we not thankful very often? Right? To be in a state of shukr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And ultimately that shukr boils down to recognizing the blessings of God. And we narrated a narration from the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him and his family, in which he said, narrating a hadith al-Qudsi from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the servants on the Day of Judgment to go to hell, or that they'll be sentenced to hell. They said, but we prayed, we recited Quran. He says, you didn't give thanks. They said that we gave thanks. He said that you did not give thanks to the one who brought you those blessings, meaning you didn't recognize that person. So we cannot be a Muslim without recognizing the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a true Muslim, right? A true follower, a true servant of God. And to that effect, we then, of course, spoke about how all of this boils down to, or comes down to, the Imam of our time. He is the most important for us as our living Imam. He is the embodiment of everything was within the Prophet, within Amir al-Mu'mineen, within the 11 Imams, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhim, everything. He is that very embodiment. And that's why Sayyid ibn Tawus, who died in 664 Hijrah, one of the great scholars of Islam and of Ahlul Bayt, madhab of Ahlul Bayt, he died in the city of Hilla, which is one of the suburbs of Karbala, very close to Karbala. He writes in this book, which was a will to his son, he writes some very incredible things, and I introduced it last night, but he was a man of profound spiritual sincerity. He wrote about 50 books on spirituality, and he has a section, and I'm going to discuss that section pertaining to the 12th Imam, where he says, الفصل بيان بعض الأمور متعلقة بالإمام المهدي. The section in which some of the matters concerning Imam Mahdi are mentioned. وطرح بعض الشبهات في غيبته. And rejecting or nullifying some of the doubts that come about because of his occultation. Now, interestingly, all of this is for his son. So he wrote this book after the birth of his son. And the story goes, as he himself narrates to us and writes to us, that the news of the birth of his son came to him while he was under the dome of Imam Hussein alayhi salam on the 9th of Muharram. And that set off a whole chain of events which led to him writing this book, particularly in Karbala. Of course, Hilla is close to Karbala. but writing this book in the vicinity of the grave of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam for his son. And here he says, Usika, ya waladi Muhammad, O my son Muhammad, I advise you, wa akhaku man yaqifu ala kitabi, I advise you and I advise your brother and whoever comes across this book, right? It has a beautiful title, right? Kashful Mahajja li Thamaratil Muhajja. That it's the unveiling proof, the unveiling kind of light and proof, criterion for the apple of my heart, for the core of my heart. It's a beautiful title of the book. So he says here, I advise you bisidqi fi mu'amalatillah jalla jalala. He says that I advise you first of all to be truthful in how you deal with God. Everything begins in how we're truthful and how we deal with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Again, he comes to this point again, the same point that Sheikh Mahdi Naraki came to. We talked about Sheikh Mahdi Naraki last night already, so we're not going to rewind to that. But to at least be truthful in how we deal with God. That's the main thing. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala want from us? To be truthful in how we deal with Him. Truthful is in how. If we sin, then admit that that's what we are. If we're a sinner, be admitful of that. Be cognizant of that. We don't walk around God's earth as if we're some kind of gift to humanity. So we have to begin by having sidq in how we work with God. And then having sidq in how we work with the Messenger of Allah and how we live and how we operate with the Messenger of Allah. Mu'amala ma'a Rasulillah. And how we live with Him, what He means to us in our life. He says that there's two ways of living. He talks about here and in Falah al-Sa'il, another very important book on ibadat. In that book, he says something interesting which is similar to this, but the point is that there are two ways of living. There's living a lie and living a life of truth. وَحِفْظُ وَصِيَّتُهُمَا بِمَا بَشَرَ بِهِ مِنْ ظُهُورِ مَوْلَانَا الْمَهْدِي. And in protecting what Allah and His Messenger have told us and foretold us about the dhuhur and the appearance of the Mahdi, the existence and the dhuhur and the appearance of the Mahdi. So truthfulness in dealing, in acknowledging, in understanding, in living by what Allah and His Messenger have told us about the Mahdi, about the 12th Imam. He says, I advise you about being truthful about this. Why? He says, فَإِنِّي وَجَدْتُ الْقَوْلِ وَالْفِعْلِ مِنْ كَثِيرٍ مِنَ النَّاسِ فِي حَدِيثِهِ. Because he says, I find many people saying many things about him. So now what they say, there are problems in two ways here. من طرفين. First problem is most of them don't even know what they're talking about, he says. So there's a problem of knowledge, but he's not so much concerned about that, but that's a problem. The second one is مخالفا للعقيدة من وجوه كثيرة. That it's in opposition to their belief. What does this mean here? He goes through and he explains that basically there's contradictions in what they say about the Imam and what they do for the Imam. There's a contradiction in their life, he says. It's a sensitive subject. But Sayyid ibn Tawus was a kind of person who, he would just be very upfront about things. And like I said, he's a scholar whose reputation is without doubt. He says, بَذَلَ فِي تَحْسِيلِهِ غَايَةَ الْمَجْهُودِ. He says, the thing that I often ask mu'mineen is really what effort, if they look at their life, the sum of their life. They have 24 hours in the day, 7 days in a week, 365 days in the year. They have a body and a mind that God has given us, and most importantly, that heart by which to discover the wonders of God. If they say, Assalamu alayka ya sahib al-asri wa zaman, do they even know what the word sahib al-asr means? The owner of the time, it doesn't literally mean that, but it is a very powerful word to say. If the Imam is Sahib al-Asr, meaning the Qibla of the hearts of the mu'mineen, how often is our heart turned to him? We have 24 hours in the day, 7 days in a week, 365 days in the year. How much of that hand to heart in front of God? Because he begins with sit, to have truthfulness in how we deal with God. Hand to heart, when we turn to God, how much of that is for the Imam? So when we say, Assalamu alayka ya sahib al-asr, is it a truthful claim? He says, in its apparent saying, it's true. But it's mukhalifan to what that belief means. It's in opposition to what it really means. So hence, that person is living a lie. He uses very, very clear language and very profound language. He then asks a question which is linked to that question. He says, take your life and do some analysis of it. Think of the amount of mental, physical, and financial effort that you put in to the acquisition of wealth. Right? Putting in capital, watching it grow, building a business. And he's saying these are all normal things, and mu'minin have to do these things. No one's saying not to do that. And think, okay, this is for a short term so that I could have X, Y, Z, this car, this house, this, okay, fine. Then on the other hand, put the Islah of Islam and Muslimin. The welfare of Islam and Muslimin. Because everything connected to the Imam is for the welfare of Islam and Muslims. For their life, for their aqidah, for their belief, for preserving that Iman. مثل تعلق الخاتم بتلك الأشياء المحقرات. He said, is there any comparison in the amount of their attention to that and to this? No. So he says the relationship with Imam has to begin with one of sorrow. Of tawbah. How many of us are ready to do that tonight? He says, if you're not ready to that, just keep your mouth quiet and careful with saying Ya Sahib al-Zaman. Because it's a very heavy word, it's called thaqeel. If we just ponder over what we say in the ziyarah every day, the meaning of this word, he says you would start to have buka and tears. If we understood, but he said this is the thing. He says mughalat, people like, I guess in from Arabic to Urdu we would say this jazbati slogans, But he said that's good. But is it true or not? That's the question. Is there sidq with it? Allah and His Messenger and Imam don't need that. Because that's monopoly hypocrisy. They would rather us do that ziyarah maybe once with cognizance and awareness. It doesn't have to be done like some kind of, I'm not saying not to do it, do it. I'm not speaking against it. We have to do it every day. We have to remember the Imam at every moment. I'm talking about cognitively, spiritually speaking. It's very heavy. It's a mas'uliyat. عجل الله تعالى فرجه وسهل الله تعالى مخرجه with Allahu Akbar or kalam. Oh Allah, make it easy for him to come. Prepare the road for him. What have I done spiritually even to prepare myself? Leave aside, pave the road for the Imam or for that dua to be accepted from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Sayyid ibn Tawus says, how much of our religious life is a lie, he says. Give up. He said, until Shia look at themselves in the mirror, they will not improve their relationship with the Imam. So we have to begin the relationship with the Imam from a position of remorse. Because he's the hujjat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No matter what we do will not be enough, because he's the hujjat of Allah. He says, كيف يعتقد من يكون بهذا الصفات أنه عارف بحق الله جل جلاله وحق الرسول صلى الله عليه وآله معتقدا إمامته على الوجه الذي يدعى ويدعي المغالاة والمغالاة للشريف معاله. He says, how do they, knowing what the haqq of the Imam is, then do these jazbati slogans? Mughalat wa mu'alat. This is what he's saying. You know, like what those people, the big guys say, wow, you know, their hands, fists pumping, you know. He says, easy, Baba, take it slow. Do you know what you're saying? He's saying. Allah's looking for sidq, kunu ma sadiqeen, Allah says in Quran. Be with the truthful. This fist pumping and chest pumping is not going to get you closer to qurbatin ilallah ta'ala. Unless it comes from a place of tears and sincerity, yes. No one is to judge anyone else. That's everyone else in front of Allah. Sidq ma'Allah, not ma'al akhirin. No, not with God, not with other people. The ulama of akhlaq, the ulama of Islam, whether they be Sahib Mikyal al-Makarim, al-Isfahani, Sayyid ibn Tawus, Sheikh Mehdi Naraki, Sayyid al-Sistani, Sheikh Wahid al-Khurasani. Our ulama are very truthful with us because they have understood this through tajarrubat, through their own life experiences. The ones who say such words, mark my words, mu'minin, tonight, they say it because they've experienced it and they understand it. We know this. What does Sayyidina Tawus say himself? He says that we know that any person who compiles a book of dua and ziyarah, starting with Sheikh Tusi, and we know the time of Sheikh Abbas al-Qumi, these are our great ulama, maraja, great scholars of Islamic spirituality. The great ones, the ones that they are our connection to the Imam during the occultation, right? He says that they don't prescribe any of these ziyarat or du'as that they put in this book, especially starting with Sheikh Tusi himself, who's a founder of the Hawza of Najaf al-Ashraf over 1,000 years ago. 1,000 years ago or so or more. Except that they practice every single one, but he says it in such an amazing way. Yani he says that they hang it like a necklace around their own neck first. He doesn't just say they practice it. They hang it as a necklace or a brace around their own neck, a tight qilada around their own necks first. Meaning they experience through tajriba and dhawq and experience every single aspect of it first. That's why he says himself that everything that I am saying to you, O my son, I have experienced it in my own life, I have seen in my own life, and I'm telling it to you from two perspectives. Aqlan, intellectually, and experientially. That I've seen it myself. I know it. And no one in Islamic history, ila yawmina hada, has ever doubted Sayyid ibn Tawus' claims. Not one. Not ala mehili, nobody. So we have to ask ourselves, where do we stand? Let's go to Ziyarat ala Yasin, one of the most authentic and important ziyarat taught to us by the 12th Imam. narrated through Abdullah bin Ja'far al-Himyari, who we knew would connect with Hussein ibn Ruh. Hussein ibn Ruh was the Na'ib, the special representative of the 12th Imam during the lesser occultation. Fine. Abdullah bin Ja'far al-Himyari would receive responses from Hussein ibn Ruh, who was the gate to the Imam in Baghdad. One of those responses that were received to Abdullah bin Ja'far al-Himyari was what? أنه خرج إليه من الناهية حرسها الله بعد المسائل. So after some of the fiqhi issues that were asked, والصلاة والتوجه أوله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. So basically it begins by saying anybody who wants to do tawajjuh, turn to the Imam, how do they do it? So the Imam is writing through Hussein ibn Ruh. That's how he would write to the community. Right? These are known to rescripts, tawqiyat. So this one came to Abdullah bin Ja'far al-Himyari, one of the great scholars of hadith. وَلَا لِأَمْرِ اللَّهِ تَعْقِلُونَ وَلَا مِنْ أَوْلِيَائِهِ تَقْبَلُونَ. He says, first, pity is it that most people do not have the intellect, or they don't bother to think about this matter. And most people will not accept the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He begins with this. حِكْمَةٌ بَالِغَةٌ عَنْ قَوْمٍ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. And it is a great wisdom. And those who don't believe will never accept this. Meaning what I'm about to say is only for mu'mineen. وَالسَّلَامُ عَلَيْنَا وَعَلَى عِبَادِ اللَّهِ صَالِحِينَ. And peace be upon us and upon the righteous servants. And then what does he say in this? First of all, we know, as Amir al-Mu'mineen has said, or as we read in the ziyarah of Amir al-Mu'mineen, أَنَّكَ وَجْهُ اللَّهِ الَّذِي مِنْهُ يُؤْتِي. That you are the direction towards God. That there's no way to God except through you. And what does the Imam say in the ziyarah that he teaches us? خَلَقَ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسِ لِعِبَادَتِهِ. Allah created the jinn and the ins to worship Him. Fine. وَأَرَادَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ إِبَادَةً. And He willed for them to be in a state of worship to Him. فَشَقِيٌّ وَسَعِيدٌ. فَشَقِيٌّ وَسَعِيدٌ. Then they will be of two types. They will either be a loser or a winner. I'm just making this very simple, the translation, okay? It's more than that. شَقِيٌّ وَسَعِيدٌ. They will either be happy or miserable, successful or a loser. قَدْ شَقِيَ مَنْ خَالَفَكُمْ. Miserable is the one who opposes you. The Imam is teaching us how to talk to him. Imagine. Miserable is the one who opposes you. وَسَعِدَ مَنْ أَطَاءَكُمْ. And successful and happy is the one who obeys you. This is the kalam from whom? Sahib al-Zaman. In Ziyarat al-Yasin, which is arguably one of the most authentic ziyarah that we know to have ever come from the 12th Imam. I don't have time to go into this subject of the science of hadith here. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Why is this important? Ibn Tawus raises another matter connected to this, which is the people who understand who the Imam is, understand that the health of their community and their family is vital in order to connect with the Imam, to be blessed by his light. So their ultimate concern is anything that would harm their own soul or the community's soul from the true aqidah and the true beliefs. That's their ultimate concern, is to protect people from division and attacks that would nullify or hurt their beliefs. Hifdul Iman. That one of the signs of the people who really love the Imam, when they say, Ya Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman, is the hifd of Islam, the protection of Islam and Muslimin, and particularly the protection of the followers of the Imam. They will cross whatever mountain they have to. They will climb whatever place they have to. What doesn't matter what it is. But if it's for the hifd of the deen of Ali Muhammad, they will do it. This is one of the, what we call the checkups to see where they're at with regards to the Imam of the time. How much do they want him? How hungry are they? What is the raghbah within their hearts? And that will be one of the determinations as to whether that person is shaqi or sa'id, miserable, loser, or a felicitous, happy winner in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why Ibn Tawus goes back to the ghayat al-majhood. How much effort does the person put in? Really, at the end of the day, when they do their hisab and their accounting, how much does it come to? And there's a question of sincerity. That's a different thing altogether. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. He then goes on to say something else, which all the ulama say, mu'mineen, all of them, Sheikh Mufid, Sharif al-Murtada, Sayyid bin Tawus, Al-Alam al-Hilli, on and on and on, all of them say the same thing, that we cannot understand who the imam is until the mas'ala of imamat is clear itself. What is imamat? I don't have time to do this in 5 minutes, 7 minutes I have. I only have about 35, 40 minutes to speak. I mean, these are very short periods. We don't have time. The mas'ala of the imama, or 15 minutes. But the mas'ala of the imama is the foundation to all of this. Why must an imam exist? If it is believed that there cannot be any period without the guidance of God, the unadulterated, unrestrained guidance of God, whether the person is seen or unseen is immaterial. That's our problem. That's more of a logistical issue. That's on us. That has nothing to do with the matter itself. Is the guide present or not? If you believe there must be an imam at every time, and you believe al-khulafa ithna ashar kulluhum min Quraysh, and you believe that the imams are 12 and that they will all be from Quraysh, if you can prove this decisively, and you can prove the need for a divinely inspired guide at every single time, then the matter of the Mahdi becomes a very easy one to handle. And if you understand who God is, and the hand of God in human history, through the history of the prophets that have come before, and the challenges and tests that have come upon previous civilizations and communities, then you will understand the reality of the Mahdi. Ajjalallahu ta'ala faraja. You will understand. Why? What does Shaykh al-Mufid say? Shaykh al-Mufid was one of the most important Shia scholars that ever lived, okay? One of the foundations of our school of thought in the early part of the greater occultation was from Shaykh al-Mufid, the writer of Kitab al-Irshad, and many, many other books. I just finished a work on the Ghaiba, inshallah, it's forthcoming. Either with one press or another, but inshallah it's forthcoming. We just finished this work, inshallah, on the occultation of the Imam. It's a translation and a commentary on Al-Fusul al-Ashra fil Ghaiba, which is the 10 matters pertaining to the occultation of the 12th Imam. In this book, what does Mufid say? He says, he begins to answer the question, what is the use of having an Imam that we can't see? And I'm pretty sure it's in most people's minds here. Let's not like I said, let's not be in denial. For the people who are not study the Aqidah properly, this might be a recurring question that comes up in their minds. What does Mufid say? Mufid, Murtada, all of them. I mean, it's a beautiful answer. He says, remember, these were the people closest to the time of the Imam, right? What does he say? He said, the delegates would cause the Imam to come out, that if there is any matter where the Sharia is at risk, Sharia meaning not only the law, but the very essence of Islam, the very essence of the Aqidah, the very essence of Islam is at risk. The delegates, meaning the Imam has people. There's no doubt about that, whether it be in the lesser occultation or the greater occultation. This is a belief. This is an understanding of Shaykh Mufid, Sharif Murtada, Al-Karajiki, Al-Hilli, on and on, Sayyid Ta'awuz on. It's our fault if we don't know these things. That's our fault. If we're ignorant to the Aqidah of the 12 verse, then we have to maybe learn our own Aqidah. But this is what it is. He says that the delegates would cause the Imams to come out to execute this responsibility themselves, and the same applies regarding jihad, this offensive fighting, right, which is with the Imam. Do you not see that this was carried out? I'm reading to you directly, so I'm not putting my own opinion. With those vested with authority on behalf of the prophets and the Imams instead of them. Hence, they are not required to implement it by themselves. He said this was always known. During the life of the Prophet and during the Imams, there were many, many matters that the Imams themselves never implemented. But it was understood by the people that knew. Therefore, it is known, as per what we have mentioned, that there is a greater need for the Imam's presence and a rejection of his not being present due to him having the exclusive responsibility for safeguarding the sacred law. And no one else can safeguard as well as overseeing the performing of it other than him. So ultimately, this is the Imam's role. And if a situation was to ever arise, Mufid says, where the Sharia itself is at risk, the Imam will interfere in this matter. And we know this, and we have seen this, and we know this. 100% miyah bil miyah. This has been the understanding of the Shia scholars from the early 300s, from the time of the Imam ila yawmina hada. Ghaiba does not mean the Imam is not here. This has to be understood. Please register this. The Imam is with us. He is doing things. He is working. But not in a way that is understood, that is seen to us. This is the ghaibiyat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the unseen things of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's a difference between ghaiba and adam. Adam means non-existence. Ghaiba just means that he's not seen. And that's a test for the mu'mineen, as Allah has tested previous communities and previous civilizations. That does not nullify the preservation of the deen. Those are two separate matters altogether. Masalatan mutafarriqan. We have to understand this, because I know this thought is in many minds of mu'mineen. It's normal. But our scholars have explained this. The ahadith are very clear on this from the early periods until now. There is no ambiguity on these issues. As Sayyid Ta'awuz says, this is from two ways, aql and experience. Either one intellectually understands this, but hopefully they should also experience it with their heart. The Imam's presence in their life. And then he gives a list of ways by which people can experience the Imam in their life. We'll talk about that tomorrow. He gives a list, a very important list, of things that each and every one of us can do to experience the Imam's presence in our life. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I will conclude with a hadith from the Imam himself in one of his most important letters, where the Imam writes in a letter something very, very, very powerful, and tomorrow inshallah we can discuss more about this matter, where he says, وَسَلِّمُوا لَنَا. Imam al-Zaman is saying this in one of his letters, authentic letters, meaning it's found in very reliable books like Sheikh Tusi and the books of Tusi and Suduk and others. سَلِّمُوا لَنَا, submit to us. وَرُدُّوا الْأَمْرَ إِلَيْنَا, and bring your matter, your affair back to us. That whatever situation you have, you need to return it, you need to bring it back, you need to bring it to us. وَلَا تَمِيلُوا عَنَ الْيَمِينِ لِلشِّمَالِ, don't swerve from right to left. Have a sense of consistency in your deen, a consistency in your understanding of Ahlul Bayt, a consistency in practice, a consistency in striving to learn more about the Aqidah, the true Aqidah and understanding of the Imams. Don't swerve from right to left, the Imam says. to all of us. لا تميلوا عن اليمين إلى الشمال واجعلوا وصولكم إلينا بالمودة وعلى سنة الواضحة, and make your relationship with us, your arrival, but literally your relationship with us, on two foundations, if we want the Imam. Two things the Imam Zaman tells us tonight, that I'm going to say tonight rather. Love, an undying love, unconditional love, unconditional allegiance, mawadda. وَعَلَى السُنَّةِ الْوَاضِحَةِ, that our practices are not based on what my father or my mother has told me, or grandfathers, not on the basis of knowledge, on the basis just of unknown tradition. Religion is not based on that. The Imam has made this clear many times in many letters, mu'mineen. We have to ask ourselves, what am I practicing, what am I believing, and is it based on a proper foundation? Ala sunnatin wadiha, a clear sunnah. Meaning, have I sought it from the right sources? What is the source of my knowledge? Who are the teachers that I take on? Who are the people that I sit with? Because we know the julus with the alim is the greatest kind of company that someone can have, sitting with a scholar. Why? Because Imam al-Hadi tells us that person saves us from shaitan and guides us to the Imam of the time. That's the function of the alim, the greatest function among other functions. That sitting with an alim is better than 1,000 rak'ah. Julus in the alim. Because that person knows what the sunnah is. They know who the imam, they know the proofs of the imamat. They can guide you to that imam. They know. They will save you. That's why the Imam al-Hadi says that the hearts of the weak Shia, qulub al-du'afa min al-Shia, where are they? في يد العالم لأنه صاحب السفينة. They're in the hands of a scholar, a godly scholar, who knows the Imam of the time and guides you to the Imam of the time. This is Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam narrating to us. We have many traditions like this. So if we don't know, we have to seek knowledge from someone who knows. And then we can be truthful with God, His Messenger, and the Imam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Tonight I'll narrate to you a poem from Sheikh Hadi Kashif al-Ghita, one of the great ulama of Najaf al-Ashraf, great scholar. He narrates Alama al-Mukarram, one of the great historians of Najaf al-Ashraf, without argument, the great scholar Alama al-Mukarram, Abdul Razak al-Mukarram, narrates from Sheikh Hadi Kashif al-Ghita this poem. It's a beautiful poem. I'll narrate to you. Sheikh Hadi Kashif al-Ghita was one of our great maraja, great ulama. Maghlulatu aydi ila al-a'naq. In describing Sayyidah Zainab, he says that her hands, this of course based on hadith, we'll get to that for Sahib al-Zaman, that her hands were chained to her neck, being herded, tusabba or tusba, ala ajaf min niyaq, being taken prisoner and now being herded on an emaciated camel, a weak camel. So you could imagine Sayyidah Zainab with her hands locked to her neck, being taken on a camel. Hasiratul wajh bighayri burqa, that her face was uncovered, without any covering, right? It was open, exposed. La sitarun ghayru sa'id wa adhra, and she had nothing to cover her face but her arm and forearm. Her forearm and shoulder, rather. قَدْ تَرَكَتْ عَزِيزَهَا عَلَى الثَّرَى, that she left her beloved Hussein on the ground, على الثرى. وَخَلَفَتْهُ فِي الْحَجِيرِ وَالْعَرَى, And she left him behind in what? In the baking heat and ara, exposed, without any kafan, nothing. She had to leave him like this. وَإِن نَظَرَتْ لَهَا الْعُيُونُ وَلَوْلَتْ. And if the eye sees her, they begin to mourn, begin to wail. Or نَظَرَتْ إِلَى الرُّؤُوسِ أَعْوَلَتْ. And if they see the heads on the spears, they begin to wail and to scream. She only wished, tawaddu, anna jismaha makbur. She wishes that her body was buried with her brother. This was the wish of Zainab. She said many times to her brother that, may my heart be sacrificed for your heart. When she came running to him, what was her wish when she begged for the life of her brother? Right, these are ayama Zainabiyya now have come, right? What was the wish of Zainab when she was begging for the life of Hussein ibn Ali? Was that her life be given for his life. But of course, this was not to be, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hujjat was Allah's hujjat. وَلَا يَرَاهَا شَامَةَ الْكُفُّورِ. And she only wished that these evil men would not see her. The ones who have never seen the face of Zainab, salamullahi alayha. But now these evil, corrupt, despicable men are looking at the face of Zainab bint Ali alayhi salam. And according to other traditions, it was quite a terrible scene. Allama Mukarram narrates that Sheikh Kashif al-Ghita wrote the rough draft of the poem. But when he went back to the poem, he saw 2 more lines added to it. Ajeeb wa Ghareeb, where did these lines come from? Allama Mukarram would not make such a thing up. He's one of the great scholars. He says, وَهِيَ بِأَسْتَارٍ مِنَ الْأَنْوَارِ. And she is covered in veils of light. تَحْجُبُهَا عَنْ أَعْيُنَ النَّظَّارِ. That these veils of light become a hijab for her from those who are looking at her. And Allama Mukarram says that it was very strange, because this was not in the muswada. This was not in the rough draft. But Sheikh Kashif al-Ghita found these lines in the final copy. How did they arrive in the final copy? He says, لا ينكره أهل الإيمان. The people of faith do not reject, and they do not think it is strange that this could be من الحجة المنتظر عجل الله فرجه إذا كتب هذا. He says that the people of Iman it is not unusual. Remember, as I said, Mu'mineen, people like Allama Mukarram, Sheikh Hadi Kashif al-Ghita, these people have experienced Sahib al-Saman. I'm going to specifics, but these are people way higher than us. He's saying that it is not unusual for Imam to add these lines to the poem. That don't worry, Mu'mineen. If we think that Zainab was uncovered, Salamullahi alayha, the mountain of patience, the mother of musibat, then know that it was the light of Allah that was enveloping her, inshallah. Ala la'natullahi ala qawmi dhalimeen, Matim Hussein alayhi salam.
Ya Hussein, 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 Ya Hussein. हर मजलिसे शब्बीर में आती है माँ शब्बीर की, कहती है क्या ऐ मोमिनो तुमसे ये माँ रोती हुई, जख्मी है मेरा लाडला, जख्मी है मेरा लाडला, मरहम मुझे दे दो कोई, मरहम तो है अश्के अज़ा, रूमाल में ले जाऊंगी। इन आंखों ने भर दिए सब जख्म तो दिलगीर के, दो गाँव से है मगर भरते नहीं शब्बीर के, ना भूले शब्बीर شبیر نہیں بھولے، نہ بھولے نہ بھولے، شبیر نہیں بھولے۔ ایک چادر زینب کی، ایک چادر زینب کی، ایک سینہ اکبر کا، ماتم کرو ماتم کرو، گھر لٹ گیا شبیر کا، میں آ گئی شبیر کی، ماتم کرو شبیر کا، خنجر تلے نیز پتھوی کرتے رہے شکر خدا، نہ بھولے نہ بھولے، شبیر نہیں بھولے، نہ بھولے شبیر نہیں بھولے۔ ایک چادر زینب کی، ایک چادر زینب کی، ایک سینہ اکبر کا، تیروں پہ تھا لاشا تیرا، روتی رہی کربلا، کہنے کی جب پردہ اٹھا، بولی بہن بھیا میرا، لاشا تڑپ کے رہ گیا، کرتے رہے شکر خدا، نہ بھولے نہ بھولے، شبیر نہیں بھولے، بھولے نہ بھولے، شبیر نہیں بھولے۔ ایک چادر زینب کی، ایک چادر زینب کی، ایک سینہ اکبر کا، سغرا ادھر روتی رہی، مولا ادھر روتے رہے، وہاں منتظر بیمار تھی، یا قتل سب ہوتے رہے، صحرا میں گھر لٹتا رہا، کرتے رہے شکر خدا، نہ بھولے نہ بھولے، شبیر نہیں بھولے، نہ بھولے نہ بھولے، شبیر نہیں بھولے۔ ایک چادر زینب کی، ایک چادر زینب کی، ایک سینہ اکبر کا، مارا گیا غازی تیرا، پھر بھی کہا شکر خدا، قاسم گیا اصغر گیا، پھر بھی کہا شکر خدا، ہر لاش پر آتے رہے، کرتے رہے شکر خدا، نہ بھولے نہ بھولے، شبیر نہیں بھولے، نہ بھولے نہ بھولے، شبیر نہیں بھولے۔
کشتی شکست خورده طوفان کربلا، کشتی شکست خورده طوفان کربلا، در خاک و خون فتاده به میدان کربلا، کشتی شکست خورده طوفان 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 کربلا. گر چشم روزگار بر او فاش میگریست، گر چشم روزگار بر او فاش میگریست، خون میگذشت از سر ایوان کربلا، کشتی شکست خورده طوفان 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 کربلا. گر چشم روزگار بر او فاش میگریست، گر چشم روزگار بر او فاش میگریست، خون میگذشت از سر ایوان کربلا، کشتی شکست خورده طوفان کربلا،
کشتی شکست خورده طوفان کربلا کشتی شکست خورده طوفان کربلا
کشتی شکست
خورده طوفان کربلا
کشتی شکست
خورده طوفان کربلا
کشتی شکست خورده طوفان کربلا زن تشنگان هنوز با اویوت میرسد زن تشنگان هنوز با اویوت میرسد فریاد الاتش ز بیابان کربلا فریاد الاتش ز بیابان کربلا آه از دمی که لشکر اعدا نکرد شرم آه از دمی که لشکر اعدا نکرد شرم کردند به خیمه سلطان کربلا کشتی شکست خورده طوفان کربلا کشتی شکست خورده طوفان کربلا گر چشم روزگار با او فاش میگریست گر چشم روزگار با او فاش میگریست خون میگذشت از سر ایوان کربلا کشتی شکست خورده طوفان کربلا کشتی شکست خورده طوفان کربلا یا حسین
صلوات اللهم صل على محمد و آل محمد الله اکبر الله اکبر الله اکبر الله اکبر اشهد ان لا اله الا الله اشهد ان لا اله الا الله اشهد ان محمد رسول الله اشهد ان محمد رسول الله اشهد ان عليا ولي الله اشهد ان عليا حجة الله حي على الصلاة